Guys, so I'd like to talk a little bit about oil change interval. Whether or not it's a newer truck or an older truck, the newer trucks technically can go a little longer because they're supposed to run cleaner, I think is a bunch of poppycock. But anyways, the reason that I wanted to talk about it, lots of guys have asked, and I did a little bit of video before about it, but so we just, on the live stream the other day, for you guys that didn't watch, this head, or we tore an engine apart, but this head is a good show for what happens when you don't change your oil often enough. So that being said, if you have a newer truck, I don't care if it's a new truck, old truck, you have to be changing your oil a little more often than some people are. So let's go into talk about a little bit about that. I'm going to go over to the board and we're going to have a little chat about it, and then maybe a little bit about oil as well for you guys that are interested. And yeah, I'll meet you over at the board. Over here at the board. Now, talking about oil change intervals, the older trucks, so let's say pre-DPF probably, myself personally, I like no more, so let's say, oh, apparently I can't write, 89 to 2006. Myself personally, I'm going to do it in miles for you guys that are in Canada or needing kilometers, just do the conversion on it, or a rough conversion. 7,000 miles. Now, myself personally, I do it way more often than that. And I've had guys say, oh, you do it too often. Hey man, oil's cheap, engines are expensive. That's just the way I look at it. I don't have engine failures. I change my oil. I don't usually use expensive oil. I use cheap oil usually. So do as you may, but this is what I recommend. When we just tore that motor apart, I just thought I'd talk about it a little bit. So for an 89 to 06, I personally would go no more than 7,000 miles, myself personally. Now that would be highway miles. So highway. I've been struggling today. Highway writing. I'm not that good at writing to begin with, but now if you're doing in-town short drives, that type of stuff, or yeah, let's talk in-town short drives, not a lot of idling. Myself personally, I wouldn't go more than, I go even less than this. This is the high end of what I would recommend short drive. 5,000 miles. I think what they recommend on these is 7,500 miles, I think is what they always recommended. I don't care whether you're using synthetic or conventional, don't care. And now if you want to run a bypass oil filter and synthetic oil, you can go longer on it. You still need to change both filters because that's what catches all the crap. And then you also need to do oil analysis, my opinion there again. Now, if you are, so now talking about tow trucks, stationary engines, tractors, bulldozers, whatever, anything that's got a 5.9 Cummins, 5.9 or 6.7 Cummins in it. Could be a genset, could be a crusher, could be all kinds of different stuff. Water pump for you guys that are doing that, whatever it may be, or pumps in general. Myself personally, so they recommend 300 hours is the oil change. Now, 300 hours in service. Now, in service is going to mean the engine is being worked. So a water pump, a genset, something like that. So it's under load, 300 hours. Now, myself personally, if the truck is sitting there idling, which is like the worst thing that you can do for it, is that you're going to change. I personally change if you're sitting there, like let's say the truck does, let's say it's a tow truck, like this engine that we just tore apart here that was full sludge. I personally do 200, whoops, as I write a 3. I do 250 hours. Now I realize 250 hours, idle, if I knew how to spell, we'd be laughing. Holy hell. Okay. Idle. Drive. Let's just say I usually say, myself personally, if it's under a condition that it's doing a lot of idling, I don't go any more than 250 hours idle. So, myself personally. So tow trucks, any of that type of stuff, if you're not putting a lot of kilometers on, the truck runs a lot, like let's say it's running 8 hours a day, you're putting a couple 100 kilometers on, you're never gonna see this, you know, these many miles. Now, take into consideration the new trucks, we're talking newer stuff, I think like 13 plus, I think it's 13 plus. They recommend to do your oil changes at 15,000 miles, which I think is asinine. To do your oil changes at 15,000 miles, ridiculous, in my opinion. If you're changing your oil at 15,000 miles and the truck is being used as a truck, I still think that you should be spinning a new filter on this truck at 7 to 7,500 miles. Just filter at the very least, and then topping the oil up. Personally, I would run 1,500 miles on it, but hey man, sure shit, do what you want. But I personally would not. Now, if you're gonna do that, like I said, make sure you spin a new filter on every 7,500. Personally, you're running the new truck and you're using it as a truck, not as sitting around idling. Then, you know, you could probably get away with it. But if you were to blow up like this 19, let's say, and you want to put a new engine in it, you're not, because there isn't one. They're hard to find, unless you find a used one. But even used ones are starting to get hard to find because there isn't any new ones. So, or the new ones are hard to get. I shouldn't say there isn't any. They're hard to get. So personally, change your oil more often. Oil's cheap, engines are expensive. You know, you can run, what do they recommend to run on? 1030, I think. No, 1040. 1030 or 1040 diesel oil. You know, you can run a 540 synthetic. You can buy it relatively cheap. Just change your oil more often. Change your oil at 7,000 miles. You know, like it's not that expensive to change the oil versus what's a new truck? $75,000 to $100,000. You know, US dollars are like $120,000 Canadian. So personally, I would not do this. Now, talking about oil, the newer trucks are technically designed to run synthetic oil. So you can run synthetic oil. I'm not a huge believer, if you guys have been on the channel for a long time, in synthetic oils. Don't get me wrong, I've run synthetic, I use synthetic here and there. I'm just not a huge, because I change my oil so often, I only usually run synthetic oil. But as the conventional oil is starting to get harder and harder to get for a reasonable price, synthetic oil is cheaper than conventional most of the time now. I've been starting to run synthetic a little more often. So it is what it is. So as far as, you know, doing it now, if you guys really want, you know, if you want to extend your oil changes because that's like the biggest deal to you, don't get me wrong, you can. But if you're going to do that, run decent oil, and then also run a bypass oil filter. This is the brand that I used to use all the time when I was selling them. This is Clean Oil, no affiliate to them or anything. And it has like kind of looks like a toilet paper roll inside of it. That takes your oil, and it also takes moisture out, which is another big problem. If the engine's not coming up to temperature. Now this takes that out, takes moisture out, takes the dirt out down to 1 micron. Running this, and then your full flow oil filter, I still recommend myself personally, probably don't have to change this one per se, but your full flow filter, I would still recommend changing at 7,000 miles. And then you can run it longer, but if you're gonna go more than 15,000 miles, even running a bypass oil filter, I preferably, myself personally, would be having oil analysis done, but I just don't see the benefit in doing that. I have done it to try it, to see. I put 40,000 kilometers, now that's kilometers, not miles, obviously, but I put 40,000 kilometers on my 12 valve, running a bypass oil filter, and cheapest 1540 I could buy. And I was changing both of I was changing the bypass filter at 5,000, or no, sorry, the full flow filter at 5,000, bypass every 10,000. And I ran that oil, other than I was adding a little bit to top it back up, for 40,000 kilometers, and there was nothing wrong with the oil. I could have kept going. So that tells you something. You can do it. You just have to monitor it very closely, because if you don't, you'll run into problems, point in case, of something like that. So that engine had, what was it? 10,000, I think Evan said it had 10,000 idle hours on it. And I would like to thank Evan too. I don't know if I thanked him in the live stream. I would like to thank Evan from Pacific Diesel. He was the one that helped us out with getting that core so we had something to rip apart and I had one to play with. So I would like to thank him. You know, if anybody is in the Seattle, Washington area, chime in. Let the guys know exactly where you are, Evan, because I know you're in that area, and you guys need help with your truck or anything like that, hit him up. He's helped out 2 of my buddies so far that were down there and needed help. So anyways, just thought I'd give him a little plug. So talking on that engine that I got from Evan there, if we were to figure out how many oil changes it had, roughly, if they were doing their oil changes when they were supposed to. So it had 120,000 miles on it, right? So the engine had 120,000 miles. And if they were changing their oil at 15,000 miles, which is what the interval from Chrysler is, which is silly, like we said. The old magic calculator here, because I don't know what that is off the top of my head. 15,000, 8 times. So that truck would have likely had 8 oil changes. 8. Now that's if they actually did the oil changes. I don't know if they did. So I would have had 8 changes doing it that way. Now, if you figure 120,000 miles, or so, now we take that. Now it had 10,000 idle hours on it. Or 10,000 engine hours. I shouldn't say idle hours. I always think idle hours. Engine hours. So if you go off engine hours for oil changes, even if you go at Cummins spec, which is 300 hours. So if we do that, 10,000 divided by 300, it should have had 33. It should have had 33.3. Well, let's just say 33, just for easy figuring. Oil changes. So that gives you an idea when you're not going off hours. So that's probably roughly how many oil changes it had. If they was having done at, even if they were doing it at 10,000 miles, then it was still short, right? Even though 10,000 miles, it would have had 12, should have had 33 oil changes. If you figure it had, if they were doing it at 7,500 kilometers, what's that? Divided by 7,500. It would have had, even if you did this at 7,500, it would have been 16, and that's how many it should have had. So that goes to show you, you can't go off, on something like that, you can't go off of mileage. Like I said, even at 7,500, which is the old number, it would have been double that, right? Oh, I guess, yeah, it would have been double that, 16 oil changes. At 7,000, sorry, that was 7,000. Oh no, that was 7,500. Yeah, 7,500, so it'd be 16. I don't know why I didn't do that in my head. So that goes to show you, you know, if you're doing this, pay attention. If you're a driver, man, don't drive the truck and do that. Come on, don't be stupid. Like that's, you know, you complain that you don't get a raise, but then you're driving the truck until it does that, and then you wonder why you don't get a raise, or, you know, the boss is mad at you for the next 6 months. Come on, right? Like, don't use your brain, you know? I know lots of guys, oh, well, it's just a company truck. Well, somebody has to pay for it, and it's free. You know, Buddy probably cost Buddy $20,000 to put an engine in that truck, you know? And yeah, okay, maybe the truck made him money, but if the guy made all kinds of money for 20 years, he probably would be retired or would be doing something different. But anyways, we won't get into that. I have problems with, you know, people that are lazy. So that goes to show, just, you know, pay attention. If you're running the truck, maybe mention to the owner. If you mention it to the owner and he doesn't want to do anything, hey man, you did your due diligence and he didn't want to do anything. It blows up, hey, it is what it is. You guys, if you're a mechanic and guys aren't changing the oil off enough, tell them, you know, refer them to this video. You know, like that's the difference. But that's how many oil changes it should have had. That's likely how many it had. Even if you went 18, it's still, even if you doubled or you put an extra 10 on there, it's still shy, right? So, you know, look at it that way. Anyways, hopefully this helps somebody to, you know, so they don't have an engine blowing up like that one. Especially, you know, we're talking, well, okay, it's a 19, so it's a new truck in my head, but it's not a new truck. But still, nonetheless, that engine should have went a lot more than 120,000 miles. So anyways, like, subscribe, hit me down in the comments, and remember, it's not rocket science.